Here we are again. This is the Resilient Entrepreneur Podcast. This is Kevin Johnson of Leverage Consulting, and this is actually kind of a funny one today, but it also will get to be a really good point of discussion here. So recently someone sent me a TikTok video, which I will tell you, I'm not in TikTok. And after talking to a few people about it, I guess I'm glad I'm not in TikTok I don't have the app. Because I've learned that it is like super addicting. But with that said, I guess I've found out that you can play the TikTok videos if someone sends them to you. You can watch that one, and of course you got to sign up to watch any further ones. But they sent me this one the other day, and it was actually really funny. And somebody started out by saying, "Tell me you're rich without telling me you're rich," and then the video went on by some guy demonstrating how he's rich without saying a word. And, it was funny. It got me thinking about in the service industries, how many will kind of rely on certain things, and it's kind of like their go-to. So, for example, a common joke within the real estate world is you meet a real estate agent and they say, "Well, I've been doing this for 25 years. And really, in a sense, that doesn't speak to experience. And no disrespect to somebody who's been doing it for 25 years, but it is an example of something where it does not speak to a level of experience. And it doesn't really even speak to a level of competence. I can use the same thing in other industries. Someone can say, "I've been building houses for 20 years. Well, if you've been building one house a year, that means you've built 20 houses. And, mind you, it may be a custom home builder that literally has one time for one home per year because they do it and they knock it out of the ballpark and they do a phenomenal job. But doing it for 20 years does not say how competent you are. And the same thing, I see doctors, dentists, surgeons or their practices that will say, "Oh, well, so-and-so has been doing it for 20 years. And interestingly enough, I think it's a good fallback. And quite honestly, it'll always come out in conversation. But if that is your go-to and that is the only thing we have, then we need to work on something else. Because at some point, it becomes something where if we can't go any further than that, if we don't have more, in fact, what if, let me just pose it to you this way. What if that's always your fallback position? What if, and in fact, this was even, now that I'm talking about this, this is making this a little more spontaneous. It's making me think back to the FBI negotiator that I've listened to quite a bit. And he told the story about how he went to negotiate a hostage situation. And most hostage negotiators would go into a situation and they'd say, "Okay, I've been doing this for X number of years, and I've got this, and I have this accreditation, da, 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 da." And in the end, good for you. Okay, you've accomplished a lot, but good for you. But when he walked into this one hostage negotiation, he didn't walk in and give any indication as to what his history was or what he's been able to do in his lifetime. He just walked in and said, "Here's what we're going to do." And ultimately, all the other stuff came out later. So his years of experience, his accreditations, and everything else came out later. And interestingly enough, you can, and it kind of goes back to this TikTok video about "tell me you're rich without telling me you're rich." Well, my question to you is, can you tell someone else that you're successful in your field without telling them you are successful in your field? And for some, it might be a matter of talking about what you've been able to do for others by giving them an actual plan of what you can do. Give them a plan of things you've already done for others in the past. And the conversation about, well, how many years have you been doing this? How many of those have you placed in the past? All that stuff will come out later. But and I'll even bring in, I love using the DISC assessment tool. I think it's a phenomenal tool. It's great in you can use it in a very succinct way, or you can get really in depth with it. But even if you think about the 4 different types of personality traits, the DISC, and then even think about, for example, if you went into a room and you said to someone, "Here's what we're going to do," and left it at that. Or you walked in and said, "Here's what I see." And you immediately demonstrate that you already see, you can apply it to that individual and their needs, likes, and wants, and you're really tailoring everything based off of your experience. So essentially, you're telling them that you're successful without actually having to say, I'm successful. And, so for example, you might walk in and you might say, here's what I see, and you rattle those things off. Here's what you need to do, and you rattle those things off. Afterwards, they may have interest. And again, going back to the DISC assessment, you may go back and say, you may have the high D's, and they may look at you and say, okay, so when are we going to get this done? You may have the high I's, and they want that time to ask you a question. They want that time to get to know you better. So maybe that's where for the I's, maybe even the C's or the S's, they want to know more about you as an individual. Sometimes the D's want to, and they might ask you one question. They might ask you about your watch, or they might ask you about your purse or your car, or where you went on vacation, and that's all they need to know. But when we go on and talk too much about how we've been successful, we don't get an opportunity, and this is what it all comes down to is, can you demonstrate that you're successful as opposed to telling someone? That's the real question in all of this, is can you demonstrate that you're successful without telling someone? So this was it, and most of my podcasts run about 10 minutes. This one's actually running close to about 7 minutes right here. So part of the whole point in all this is keep it short, keep it sweet, be succinct with it, and if there's a need for more discussion, use it. But in today's podcast, I don't think there is. So stay tuned for the next podcast where I'll ask you yet another question.